Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq hollering at you one more again. All right, folks. Another magnificent day. AGD. Another great day. True indeed. Another magnificent day. Another great day, man. Surging powerfully forward. And we continue on this ascension path, this path of awakening in gratitude, right? Truly in gratitude as we surge powerfully forward. Yes, indeed. Let me just one moment. Let me make a quick adjustment. Indeed, man. It's something about when you're feeling good, when you're feeling magnificent, when you got that zest and zeal for life, huh? For life. Indeed, and that's the point we're gonna start from right now. That energy, that gratitude, that electric zest for life, huh? That's what I'm talking about. And I'm grateful to all of you joining me, Big King Sadiq, for another episode of Building with Big King. Now, in Building with Big King, what we strive to do is to lay out the foundation. That's right, we are laying the bricks, the foundation for this new high vibrational frequency paradigm. Indeed, we got the recipe, huh? And we're striving every day to grow and mature and or rather to grow and gain in spiritual maturation. Huh? Indeed. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today that normally would center on being a little bit difficult subject matter to perhaps even stomach. So we want to talk about some things that again may be challenging. Number one, right, and most certainly incredibly important, is that in my estimation, yesterday we need to find a solution and an impactful means of addressing the issue and the problem of missing children, right? Um, of course, encompassed in that is abduction, right? Sadly, um, we have learned, sadly, that there are an immense, vast networks for these um, abductors, for these networks where children are bought and sold like property, right? Like chattel and chattel slavery. It is the lowest, darkest underbelly of society where these individuals reside in and often hide in plain sight. These people who seem to thrive and spring up like weeds in a lawn that you're trying to keep green, right? Um, these folks who can only seem to represent the lowest qualities and the lowest vibrational state that a human being can house, right? And again, I'm talking about people who are given to pedophilic, um, given into, well, pedophilia in general, right? Of course, is horrible. But again, we have learned of these vast networks and rings that seem to be not only across our nation, but across the world, right? Um, this is a huge problem, right? We have, even if we take it and break it down in terms of a microcosm, macrocosm methodology of looking at this issue, right? Um, the microcosm we have to say is right in our neighborhoods, right? Um, it is that personal, indeed. It is that personal that we have to recognize we're dealing with an issue that has a myriad of layers, right? Not only in the number of issues that we're talking about, but the place that society has gotten, that so many of the ugly ills of society arise, right? And something as important as protecting our children is becoming a question. Listen, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little on the old fashioned side of things. I remember at least a time on the planet when some of the things that have become commonplace today or the things that of the past were unconscionable, unimaginable. And now we're not even surprised by them. Many of these horrible acts that we see, that we're made aware of. I had no idea when I was a teenager, a young guy, that some of these things existed so rampantly in our communities. I didn't think that when I was growing up that we had such an incredible problem with missing children and abductions and everything along that entire scale of horrible crimes committed, right? It is almost unfathomable. That's not the greatest enunciation, right, folks? But the depth of this problem, um, with us being able to protect our children, is not something that we can take lightly, and certainly a solution that will not be gained through dealing with surface issues. We have got to dig deep on this, folks, because a lot of what goes into us protecting our children better in this society is transparency, right? There is far too much shrouded behavior and secrecy around a treasure that we should be protecting, which is our children. And they have to be valued in that manner, in my opinion, as a treasure. And that starts and it shows up in a lot of places, like education. Our educational system is desperately in need of an overhaul, right? Um, our entire socio-political system, in my opinion, is in need of vastly a vastly reaching and a very comprehensive and complete overhaul, right? We're talking about a system that is broken, folks. First of all, when you're talking about human beings' happiness, and the pursuit thereof, why is the guarantee of that a question mark in the first place? Right? Sometimes a big part of this ascension path that not only are we on individually but collectively, sometimes, in my opinion, a big part of it is the common sense quotient, right? The common sense ratio. We got to turn that thing up sometimes because often we are acting without common sense. And that's even on a mass level, I'm saying, right? Okay. Thank y'all for chiming in. First of all, you got to know how incredibly important that is. It says our parents did a good job protecting our minds. Yes, they did. It was a much different environment growing up years ago. I was born in 1973. Okay, and much of the principles, the environment around the importance of family and all of the aspects of that institution, these things were just like naturally a part of our lives and our community, right? Um, Brother David goes on a little further, and thank you, Brother David, goes a little further and says the school system we grew up under taught us Latin. These young ones don't even get to learn cursive writing. Yes, folks, listen, the disparity in our educational system, right? When I hear it honestly, I can't even say this like in an underestimated way. When I hear the numbers and the reality of how many young people, how many young brothers and sisters, how many young, when I say brothers and sisters, I mean of all races, folks. I'm just broad-minded in that way. How many young brothers and sisters are struggling just with the basics, right? Literacy in this nation has is starting to become like a not a misnomer. That's not the right way to say it. Let's just say that far too often are we seeing a drop in literacy rates and seeing in reality what that looks like in our children when it's something that we should never even have to worry about. What I'm saying to you is that society is not pushing us to being our best selves. In fact, if we just blindly follow where society is guiding us to, it's essentially gotten us to ruin. This society, at 52, I never thought that I would see a society this way that is so counter progressive. What are we talking about? It's 2026 and we're talking about literacy rates. Are we moving backward, folks? No. But there is cause for concern because the low vibrational frequency influences in our society, individually as well as collectively, we got some more work that we still got to do to get that out of there, right? And when I say to get that out of there, I mean, if we are truly to grow and progress, if we are truly to take part in what we have framed as this ascension process, right? Then we have to recognize what it is we're correcting. We have seen degradation. We have seen a lack of moral fiber. We have seen that, unfortunately, there is no bottom to how low we may see things get, right? Look at prices. And when I say prices, I mean, let's look economically at what it is we're dealing with in terms of an artificial inflation, in terms of corporations essentially strangling every bit of vitality out of the family structure. Well, maybe that's a bit vague. If inflation, let's look at it systematically. If inflation will only continue to grow, what is the ceiling? Let's think about this for a second. You know how they always say, well, $1,000 is not in 2026 is not what it was in 1986. Okay, we understand that. So where's it heading? Right? If price is going to continue to climb, if the cost of things in terms of the actual real-time cost of goods and services, all the things that must continue to move to make this economy work. If we only see an inflation, what is the ceiling? Will the average automobile in a couple of years be $400,000 or $500,000? Right? What is the ceiling? What are we headed to? Is gas going to at some day soon be $50, $60 a gallon? What is the ceiling? At what point does materialism become corrosive? Right? Better yet, or more expansively looked at, at what point do we look in the mirror of our society? At what point do we look at how far we've come and direct ourselves toward what's really next? All right, I know this can be a little bit opaque or a little bit convoluted even. If we are dealing with a mass ascension that is hingent upon awareness, how deep does the rabbit hole really go? Right? These are open-ended questions I'm asking in a society that even in just my lifetime, I'm 52 years old. It's not that old. I know it might seem like it to some folks, right? But it's not that old. In my lifetime, the changes, the moral degradation, the lack of the erosion of the family structure, heck, for that matter, our lack of ability to even have healthy food and clean drinking water and healthy air to breathe that is not contaminated, that is not tainted. I mean, it's not really that much to ask even to have a decent water supply, a decent food source, to have clean, fresh air to breathe, for our children to grow up in an environment that is not tainted and corrupted. We can't even eat vegetation half of the time because we're worried about the poisons and toxins that's on it. All right. My point is that there's a lot that we can correct in this society. It's a whole lot of work to be done. for us to keep allowing days to go by and not correct some of these things, many of these things, particularly the things that threaten the safety, the well being of our children. And there's concerns that we have to stick by each other with, right? There's an aspect of solutions to these problems that we have had lost through the years, and that's unity. We don't have to speak and think about unity as though it's this impossibility. We can stick together. We have plenty of common ground with which to tread on, right? Um, I think those are very massively important aspects that Brother Dave brought up. The job that our parents did in organizing and with so many different obstacles and so little to work with, but with our parents still the amazing job that they did in raising us in many instances less than favorable situations, right? Not that our parents uh, didn't try, but in many instances it was a struggle, right? Um, we make it on through. One of the things that I personally would like to see is for us to start having a more um, open-minded educational system. What I mean by that is, I think that our educational system has begun to sort of resemble a cookie cutter system. And what I mean by that is, um, our educational system has begun to lack and foster and inspire creativity. Why would you say something like that, Big King? Well, look at some of the things that they've removed from the educational system, like arts and crafts, like music, anything that has to deal with arts and abstract learning that might not be in the uh, rigid arena of uh, uh, um, STEM. That's what I'm thinking about. That's the STEM program, right? Um, where there's a good focus on science and things of that matter, but again, we're seeing a society that is given to throw away things like creative arts, like music, right? Um, and even beyond that, some of the basic things. Um, Having a multilingual educational system. I, for one, have always kind of got on myself about the fact that, man, I was given a good education where just in high school, I studied two foreign languages, Spanish and French. Um, and I didn't take advantage of that opportunity. I should know or at least be somewhat lingual in both of those languages. I blame myself for not taking advantage of that. I had 2 years of French and a year of Spanish. Now, also in my life, I've begun to learn a little bit of Arabic. Um, so I had exposure to a lot of different things along those lines. But my point about education is that I would just love to see the education system become um, more round, more creative. I would like to see it be a system where the individuality of children is really fostered, right? That's what I meant by the cookie cutter thing. I think that our society has grown into a system of um, almost robotic like responses to how we live life, right? Or robotic systems. Um, the correct way to describe it, or a better way for me to describe it, let me see. Um, there are some schools that have popped up with a center around learning about more cultural, uh, uh, more solid cultural roots, right? Or schools that not only teach different languages, but are more creative in how they actually present education, right? Um, I think that we are finding our children. How about let's just solving some common sense problems with education? Like for one, um, why do we have to worry about our children, or why should our children have to worry about getting up, going to school in a place where they're bullied over something like clothes, right? How about bullying, period? I understand that a child has got to go and sometimes make some adjustments in their ability to learn how to be around others, right? Their ability to be able to function in a group situation, or in uh, uh, dealing with crowds, etc., right? How to be social. But there's a big difference between that and have to deal with a bully, right? And today's bully is far worse than what we used to refer to as a bully 30 years ago. Today's bully want to see you dead. They're bullying children literally to death online. So and I think what happened is a lot of us, I know with my generation, I know this happened a lot with my generation. A lot of us wanted to provide things for our children that we didn't have. And that is a noble concept. But in many instances, along with that, our thrive, or our drive to provide more uh, material things for our children, may have caused us to be a bit short sighted, perhaps. Certainly not our intention, but maybe our focus was just in the wrong place. Are we focused on providing those material things instead of some of the grounding things, some of the things that help to establish our roots to make us the people that we have grown to become growing up? Those morals, those principles that our parents were able to pass on to us. That's another thing that this society has attacked, right? The connection from one generation to another. And that's all a purposeful thing. Sometimes that's what causes me to get stagnated, is when I stop and think about the vastness of the program, so to speak, that has gone to tear down our family structure, to taint our educational system, to make us very suitable to fit somewhere in the corporate machine, whether it's in the corporate environment in a suit, or at the bottom of the total pole in the businesses that the corporations own, right? That are more mundane, that pay the minimum wage job, so to speak. It's a scale all the way up and down. You are expected to fit somewhere in that cog, or somewhere in that machine, to be a cog in that machine. And that is what your education is designed to produce. It's not designed to produce free thinking, independent people who would find their own free thinking, independent solutions to their own problems. If that were our no, I won't speculate on that along those lines. I'll just say that unfortunately, it seems evident that our educational system is not geared toward that. And I'm gonna have to point to and as an example of that is President Obama's and I believe he was the president who pretty firmly established the STEM system: science, technology. I forget actually what the acronym even stands for, mathematics. Um, but and I'm not trying to say that we don't need to have those things. Of course, we need to do. Those are part of the nuts and bolts of um, of what it is we need to function on a daily basis as adult human beings, to solve problems as human beings, to continue to push our society forward. That's understood. What we need is to no longer have the child who may have a certain talent, knack, or ability that they could truly flourish in, but it never even gets looked at or gets any attention because it's not part of the cookie cutter system. They don't have a use for it. How much are the liberal arts being taught anymore? The creative arts. These things are not just um, something that was cute and was cool to have, or was um, trendy to have. Oh, let's have art class, let's have music class. No, these things are vital to the fabric of what it is to be a human being. What would humanity's history look like if we didn't have the expression of art? What would it look like without music? What would our lives be like without music? Folks, in case you didn't know, and I guess some could say this is esoteric, but those who know that it's the case that music is very powerful. And in fact, on a spiritual level, music can pierce the veils. They even talked about in fact, they did more than talk about it. They did a fairly good job of illustrating it in the Ryan Coogler movie Sinners. You notice how when they started really jamming and really getting into the music, they were showing different individuals almost phasing in and out from different dimensions, different times, even, right? Because music is that powerful. And they took it out of the school system. Arts are that powerful. How many young individuals might be very talented graphic artists or designers of some nature, right? But we got art teachers that got to buy their own supplies to have any shot of putting together some sort of a capable curriculum where these children can artistically express themselves. I'm just saying, and there's a lot of different aspects and things that we need to correct. Number one, what is it about our educational system that is showing our literacy rate drop rather than rise? Obviously, there's something not working. Something is archaic and must be changed, right? Um, and I talk about this a lot, and I think people it goes in a deaf ear or sort of in one ear and out the other. But maybe you should go online and check and see how many educators it is who complain or I don't even think complain is the right word, who beseech people to take this thing seriously because they're in the classroom with children who are 3 and 4 levels, grade levels below where they should be in things like reading, I even just the other day had a conversation with my granddaughter, telling her the ability to be able to read is the ability to teach oneself, right? And I know that to be true because I knew a brother who was completely illiterate and slowly, over the course of years, taught himself to read using the dictionary. And then once he obtained that ability to read, just about read everything in sight and became a very, very educated man. Someone who was once illiterate and had to self-teach himself, educate himself on how to read. And once he opened up that doorway, you have a conversation with this man, you think he was talking to a genius. Well, perhaps you were talking to a genius. The point is, how many bright intellects are there out there that we are glossing over their potential because they're in a cookie cutter education system, or because they're in an educational system that is failing them and in inspiring them a curriculum that doesn't drive them to one point. Early on in my scholastic career, I wanted to go to school. I wanted to learn. I wanted to run back and tell my parents the stuff I learned in school today. Unfortunately, many of these children are, again, like I described, the problem with bullying and so forth, being saddled with so much just walking out of the door. You got to have the right dress code on, or you got to worry about being picked on from the door to the time you get back home. Then when you go to school and you finally make it and you're even in class to learn something, the curriculum is so skewed towards steering you into what society wants you to be. Where is the attention on what you're actually good at and maybe what you want to be? Right? I'm just saying, folks, there's something about our education, even if we just do it a comparative analysis to other people around the world, right? How many years? I started hearing about this when I was in school. Again, I'm 52. And it has only grown in intensity since then. But even back when I was in school, we were hearing about how we didn't necessarily stack up against other nations. We weren't nearly as far away now as we are. But in terms of skills like mathematics, we're pretty far behind. In the fact that linguistically, many other major countries have it commonplace that people know more than one language, right? There are children in many other countries that speak 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 languages. Now, yes, I understand there are cultural differences in, like, say, for example, you live in a country in Africa, in one of the countries that have multiple dialects, right? That could factor into it. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about children growing up learning Spanish, Portuguese, French, Arabic, you know what I mean? Useful things for our children to know. How about an educational system that is not wrought with lies? I didn't even touch on that yet, right? And this, unfortunately, has been the case for generations, because I remember many of these things just growing up. I remember the angered feeling I got in school and how I actually had a couple of verbal confrontations. This is just how I was in school, folks. I didn't have a problem speaking up even as a young guy. I had can remember getting into virtual arguments in the classroom with certain teachers because they tried to frame slavery like like it wasn't so bad. Like the life of a slave, wasn't something that was so awful and that we shouldn't necessarily look at slavery like was such a terrible and evil thing, right? And what was amazing is how she described talking about how they were provided for and they didn't have to worry about their meals and so forth. And I'm like, what, lady? First of all, what about freedom? Before we get to anything else, and I don't have to go and take a half an hour talking about the depravity of and the immorality of slavery. We know that. But how about maybe if we learned instead of what the curriculum teaches us, how about if we learn the truth, which is that every quote unquote black person is not a descendant of a slave from Africa, but that many of us are descendants of the indigenous people who were right here in the continent of America, of North America, not to mention South America as well, that were not brought here by slave ships, but are indigenous to these lands, right? But that's something never to be talked about in the school system. In fact, it's lied about in the school system. How about why do we not learn about the allegiances that people in the founding, that people who were considered to be the founding fathers, like Franklin, right? Benjamin Franklin. How come we didn't know more of the truth of what was going on with him? That he was a member of a secret society, a French secret society called the Order of the Nine Sisters, and what their agenda was, and what his links were to the socially economic elite. A lot of people didn't know anything about that. A few of us know about the whole, many of the founding fathers were slave owners and so forth. And that's an ugly truth as well. The socially economic elite, cabal of globalists, folks, have rendered their control upon us for a long time. Not just generations, not even just centuries, but millennia. Do the free thinking independent research to see that. And then correlate that to everything that's going on now today in our society, including the way our children are educated, or should I say indoctrinated. Everything in, or should I say, every institution that affects our everyday lives, including our education, agriculture, religion, the financial structure of our society. Everything about this society is geared towards supporting the agenda of the socially economic elite. And it can be very difficult to connect the dots because there's so many of them and they're so far spread, right? And the average person is so bogged down with just trying to survive that many of these things and these questions I'm raising, people don't have the time to think about. And I understand that. That's why it takes individuals like myself and other people to raise these things and to bring them to your attention. That maybe you take a minute or two or 45 minutes, like I've taken your time up. And I thank you all for being with me for that long. Um, to just think about some of these things, man, and not only think about them, but think about the roots of these problems. And I know, I don't think I know that if we truly deal with the root issues or the roots of these problems, um, that we can start to develop solutions that are lasting and comprehensive solutions rather than solutions to surface issues. You know, being a melanated brother, quote unquote, considered black, it's many times been raised the question, why black people can't get ahead. All these years and years, okay, and taking a look at the state of quote unquote black America now, we've made some advancements. Um, we start to understand the ways that we've been attacked. We're starting to awaken from the layers and layers of indoctrination that have been heaped upon us generation after generation. That process is happening. Or we wouldn't even be talking about things like this, right? Brother David wouldn't be concerned with understanding and reflecting on the difference between how our children are being raised today and the job our parents did in protecting our minds. Or to take a look at the school system where we were diverse enough to learn about, okay, thank you, Brother David. I appreciate you, family. Where we were diverse enough to learn about different cultures around us, particularly brown cultures, right? That have roots in history that we can benefit from. When you cut off people from passing on wisdom from one generation to the next, you're cutting off a lifeline for those people. We should all be, and I don't say this to be exclusionary of any other community, right? Because everybody got roots, folks. I don't care who you are. We all got roots, right? Um, do free thinking, independent research. Look into, and some of us have, a lot of us rather have deep roots in struggle, right? Look at the Irish and some of the things that have happened there in their struggles. I just only say that to say that I don't want you all to think that I'm being exclusionary, but it is germane to what has been the experience of Black people in this country, that we have been vehemently attacked in all of these areas, in all of the institutions that touch our everyday lives. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, the agenda of socially economic elite, the cabal of globalists and depopulationists, has targeted just about all of us. How do I know that, and why would I say that? Well, folks, if you didn't hear of the Georgia Guidestones, they were real, and they were standing for close to 40 years. And one of the things that they vehemently expressed, and by the way, these stones were very, very expensive. The finances for that whole operation of erecting these stones made it abundantly clear that we were dealing with a project of the elites. And one of the clear messages on the Georgia Guidestones was their desire for depopulationism and to see the world population reduced to and maintained at no greater than 500 million folks. 500 million folks, when we know we live in a world of a population of over 8 billion folks. So we have to always be reminding ourselves who we're dealing with when we're talking about these elites that have set up these systems and structures in place to keep their agenda rolled out throughout our society. We need to understand that. Overall, yes, um, melanated people, I prefer that, right? Or quote unquote black people have been specifically targeted. And folks, there's a very powerful reason for that. There is a potential, um, and there is not a potential is not the right word. There's a remembering that could and should occur amongst the melanated people of the planet that will reveal a majestic lineage and not the meager, paltry lineage that we're taught to swallow. You're not niggas. I'm sorry. You're just not. I know that's what's become popular these days. I'm a real nigga. You're a real nigga if you decide to be that. But you were born in a majestic lineage. The melanin that has that is contained within you and that expresses itself throughout your DNA, that melanin is one of the most magnificent molecules known to man. They even have conventions studying that molecule every year. It's even brought up in summits like the past G8 summit. Melanin is one of the most magnificent, complex molecules known to man. And its concentration in melanated people or quote unquote black people and how it expresses itself in who and what we are is magnificent. And yes, there is a system of quote unquote racism that was put in place to try to keep us specifically from thriving and going through that state of remembering, right? Um, and actually growing out of the stagnated state that we have been in for so long. That's real. But that's just one of the constructs and one of the schemes of the socially economic elite. Race and racism are all constructs that were made back in the 1500s. They ain't have black and white people and racism the way we know it today before that. Did slavery exist before that? Yes, but it wasn't based strictly upon race. In fact, not that this is something anybody should brag about, but it's a misnomer that should probably be corrected. Maybe it might change some people's thinking. But melanated people or dark people, or quote unquote black people, held slaveries, often white slaves, before anyone white was able to enslave anyone. Period. Stop. End of that sentence. Do your own free thinking, independent research. That's facts. But then, of course, that goes into uncovering other things that our educational system never wanted us even to delve into. right? The thing that fact I just spewed to you is not something we were taught in school. I didn't learn that until I did years and years and years of research as an adult to learn that. And it changed my thinking. Not, again, you should never be, it's not about who enslaved who first. The reason why it was powerful to me was to get to understand the perspective that slavery itself is wrong, not who did it to who first or who should do it. I've talked to some black people, a lot of black people. I maybe even in my early years when I was more militant minded, more angry toward quote unquote white people, I may have felt in a way that will reflect the sentiment. But again, some people that I know of wouldn't mind turning the tables and enslaving white people, right? And their justification in their minds is turnabout as fair play. But that's a slippery slope. And to those people, I would go back and warn, maybe it's already happened that way. I'll leave that for something. It's something people can think about and ponder on their own. But what I will say is we can never lose sight of the fact that these socially economic elite have been the hand. It's actually, they refer to their world wide web of secret societies as the hidden hand, often referred to and symbolized by historical leaders throughout. Like, for just to pick an example, um, the short guy, Napoleon, is often depicted uh, showing or showing him with his full military garb on, with one hand stuck in his lapel, concealed in his lapel, with the thumb sticking out so that you know it's there, but not seen. It's the hidden hand. That's what that symbology is for. And of course, Napoleon was a part of many of the French secret societies. Not, I phrased that wrong. He was a part of one of the many French secret societies. I didn't mean to state that like he was a part of many. And many of those secret societies had great influence on even the way this country was founded. Right? Um, Look at Franklin. I keep saying, go back and take a deep look at Franklin. An esoteric look, even. That's another thing we need to understand, folks. Many of the things that you were taught weren't real or made to be scared of learning about, or things that the people who have sort of kept their proverbial foot on your neck, and that doesn't just refer to quote unquote black people. Look at how the separation of uh, uh, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer has played out in this country and throughout the world in just recent generations. But anyway, when we go back and take a look, I lost my train of thought a little bit. I was choo-choo rolling on a little train there. The whole point again is that the socially economic elite have really extended their agenda throughout every institution of our lives. And it's a whole lot of work we got to do to unravel and unpack all of that. Maybe we do it one institution at a time. Maybe we do it one issue in each institution at a time. Whatever our process is, we need to begin it yesterday, because the timetable of these socially economic elite is sped up that much more. Why? Because they know that we're having conversations like the one we had today. And there's some things that I meant to touch on today that I even didn't. But still, in what we talked about, these are not the kind of conversations that we used to have just a couple generations ago, right? Um, 40 years ago, people were not talking about the socially economic cabal of globalists and depopulationist elites. People were not talking about, people weren't even aware that of the concept that there was a group of elite few who were sort of uh, uh, orchestrating how the world works or the paradigm. There, that was something people would, you know, you'd be laughed away as a conspiracy theorist. But now it's almost impossible to deny when you see the orchestration, when you see the vehement efforts of these elites only stepped up because they are in panic mode, folks. That's what I was saying. That we have to be about getting this work done right now because the elites their timetable is way sped up because too much has gotten. You have to understand the mentality that they're in right now. How did these socially economic elites maintain control to be able to implement these things over the course of generation after generation, century after century, millennia after millennia? How did they maintain control for that long? If they're the minority in number, how are they orchestrating control over the masses? Folks, their number one tool has always been the control of the flow of information. Because if they can control what you think about, and how you think about it, they got all the control they need to keep themselves in place. And all they have to do is use clever little tools like propaganda, right? Social structures like the incredible and horrific division created by racism, something that is manufactured. Races were made up. No such thing as black people. No such thing as white people. It ain't. Period. What country do black people come from? Or rather, what one place on the planet do black people come from? You can't name it because quote unquote black people are all over the planet and historically have been throughout humanity's existence on the planet. How many people do you actually look at and are actually, now there's some very dark, heavily melanated people, and quite honestly, I look at that like, man, let me get back out in the sun, tune up my melanin. But most people who you look at who are described as black are not actually black, they're brown, some shade thereof, even if it's very dark. White people, most that you know of, are not actually white. There are some, there are lighter, I don't want to even know what color I would associate, right? Let's just say that they are lighter colored, but they're not actually white like this sheet of paper, right? Like this is white. This is black, right? You don't know anybody who's this or at least not many. Again, some divine melanated folks out there. But you get my point. They had to create this structure to justify, first of all, to highlight difference, and then to justify a construct that they knew they could use as a tool of separation later, that great tool called racism. Do you know throughout all of the race tension throughout history, not to mention the conflict, the violence, the subjugation, the cruelty toward one another. While we've done all that to each other amongst these artificial lines of separation that they call race, the elite, their status and control on the planet just stayed the same. Because we weren't thinking about them. That's the way they've always operated, controlling what you think about, and how you think about it. Today, it's quite obvious the scheme of the socially economic elite, and as it's implemented by the corporations that are owned by these elite individuals and groups. What have the corporations done? The corporations have created their own artificial state of inflation. There was no reason why prices had to just all of a sudden go off the scale. Food prices, all sorts of gas prices, all sorts of product prices, clothing, everything, all of a sudden just becomes super expensive. Why? What changed that just had to happen? It didn't. Nothing made it a necessity other than the furthering of the agenda of the socially economic elite who own the corporations. So to keep that agenda rolling out, they just created their own inflationary state for this part of the world to be in, if not worldwide, so that they could further their efforts to crush anything like a middle class and only have a furthering of the separation between the rich and the poor. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That only serves and fosters their whole agenda. So they have the corporations roll it right out. What we've got to do is stop being distracted by BS in the news, BS in whatever form of multimedia that it's presented to you, right? Because it's most often a distraction to keep you from focusing on the real problems or the sources of those problems, and not seeing the agenda of the socially economic elite that's being rolled out by the corporations they control. Dare I say, the governments that they have heavy influence, if not control, in. The only way to counteract this is to do what? Let's use logic, folks. Did I not say earlier that their main tool for keeping us going with the flow of their agenda is the control of the flow of information? So we take that apart. We take apart all of their control of the flow of information, and we make the information more and more readily available to everyone. This is exactly what, in my opinion, this is exactly what we need to be doing right now. Talking to each other more, having more conversations like this. It doesn't matter just what Big King Sadiq thinks. It matters what Brother David thinks, or whoever else might listen, or who might listen later on. or who might this person share with that person and that person share with that person. But let's start talking about it. Let's keep and continue spreading awareness. Let's keep thinking outside of the box that they like to create for you to stay in, right? That's another thing about our educational system. Our educational system should not be putting the minds of our children in a perceptive box. It should be, in fact, unleashing and enhancing and helping to thrive the minds of our children in whatever direction they creatively see fit, so that we can have new ideas and ingenuity to spur on our society, our civilization, even finding more creative and comprehensive solutions to the real problems instead of with being glossed over continuously by surface issues that leave us in the same place. A place where the socially economic elite cabal of globalists and depopulationists can continue rolling out their agenda. We're not having that anymore. I'm sorry, elite folks. I don't hate you, but I'm going to tell you the truth straight to your face. We ain't with it no more. Oh, that's not correct English. Sometimes we got to watch doing that to ourselves, folks. I'm a writer. I can sit down with you and speak correct English, right? Or it's really not even English, as many British folks will tell you. It's American. There's a difference between the two. But anyway, my point is, I'm just having folks a little fun, folks. We can't talk about this stuff and not remain light. What did brother Tupac Shakur remind us of? You're going to need your sense of humor, and you got to smile, huh? We can't let them take that away from us, because then we become gloomy, dark, depressed, and walk ourselves into a dystopian nightmare of a future. That's not what we want, and we're not doing that. We're not having that. It's time for change. How does change start? It starts with awareness, because you can't solve any problem that you're not aware that you have. Once you become aware of a problem, you can start to break it down to get to its root causation. Once you understand what causes the problem, you can then find a comprehensive, true solution, instead of wasting your time and being distracted with or being distracted by surface issues. We got this, folks. Huh? The awakening is not something that's a question mark, and I refer to the mass awakening. Ascension into higher consciousness for humanity is not something that's a question mark. It is littered throughout the potentials of the Akash. This is humanity's big moment, so to speak. And the indigenous around the planet have talked about this for a long time. The Hopi Indians are famous for giving and sharing their insight on where humanity is headed, and was always eventually going to get to once we spiritually mature to that point. A lot of people refer to the Mayans and they talk about the Mayan calendar, but I don't hear enough people talking about the prophecies that the Mayans left behind about what we would go into next. Huh? About what humanity's life would look like on this planet in higher consciousness. Nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about the apocalyptic predictions of the Mayans. Go further. Go into what's going on. It wasn't an apocalypse that meant the end of us or the end of this planet. It was an apocalypse for the elite, perhaps, in their perception, because it is the foretelling of the end of a paradigm on the planet. That's what's ending. The paradigm that supported the socially economic elite. The backward paradigm, might I add. Why do you call it a backward paradigm, Big King? Because, as I borrow from Dr. Spock on Star Trek, like I often do, because I love this quote, The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. We have for too long been living in a paradigm where the blood, sweat, tears, the energy, the consent, the total output of every human being on this planet, of the masses, has been going towards satisfaction of the wants, the greedy wants and desires of the few, the elites. And it's time for that to change now. And there you have it. And there you have it, folks. And there you have it. Look at throughout history. How does a movement start? Everybody doesn't just wake up and like, 300,000 people just wake up one day. Let's do this different. I don't generally work like that. It usually starts with, a few of us way showers just venturing on out there and showing the way. Just like being a scout, right? You see how people scout ahead. That's all the way showers are doing. That's all we're doing is scouting ahead and then reporting back. Oh, this is the way. The way to end the paradigm of the socially economic elite and their control over the planet is to end their control of the flow of information and spread awareness. The more awareness spreads, the more it'll catch on. And it happens fast, folks. Oh, word of mouth is powerful. Even still, even in this information age, it's powerful. You all know that old example we were given, right? When you step in a room, like a classroom, for example, say something right at the door and say, pass it on. By the time it gets around the room, right? It then caught fire and took on its own life and become something new. And it's like that. We talk to each other. We keep it moving. When we do that, when we communicate with each other and we spread awareness, it catches quick. It catches. People want to know. People generally want to know, right? Why you got people turn on to the news every day to be given that form of indoctrination? Because they want to know what's going on in the world. They've been busy all day at work, and they want to take a few minutes and get caught up on what's going on in the world. That's how awareness spreads. We have to keep giving people the truth. We have to keep giving people the means for which to find out on their own what best serves them and their families, and to make that determination, right? It may not seem like it, folks, but we are really, really far into our ascension into higher consciousness as a species. We have come a long way. And everything in multimedia that makes you think that we haven't was put there on purpose to do just that, to get you to start thinking from a negative point, to get you to start viewing your future in a dark way, to get you to start thinking that you don't have any choice, that you can't make any difference. This is our world. The masses of this planet deserve peace, love, respect. The pursuit of happiness is something that should be germane to us all, and it should not be impeded by anyone. We should never, we must overcome and shall. We are a long way into doing it, but we must overcome any sort of a paradigm where the many are controlled by the few. That's backwards. That's illogical, just as Dr. Spock. What we need is a paradigm where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Then you'll start to see equality flourish. Then you'll start to see that great remembering occur in the melanated that needs to happen. Then you'll start to see an erosion of the artificial lines of separation that have been imposed on us, like racism, like sexism and classism, all the isms that they use to cause us to separate ourselves from one another, and all the distractions that keep us from focusing on what is our well being rather than continuing the agenda of the socially economic elite cabal of globalists and depopulationists. Folks, this is our time. We're going to change our educational system. We're going to change our political system. We're going to change our health system. We're going to change our agricultural system. We're going to change our perspectives on the scientific journey and what it is to be accepted into mainstream society, because mainstream scientific society is now going to encompass and include more and stop being so exclusionary, right? We need to have humanity gain on a whole from the exploration of science. Folks, science is the art of discovery, huh? Not for us to be dictated to a stringent set of rules that is just passed down from generation to generation, or spewed from one to another. When in fact, and that was the wrong way to say it, from generation to generation. More so, we have seen science become a box that you either think in that box, or the old paradigm, right? Remember, we're in the new paradigm now. The old paradigm told you that if you thought outside that box, you were crazy, you were antisocial, anti-Semitic, or you were a whole host of things that were all negative if you didn't go along with the kind of thinking that supported the agenda of the elites. We're changing all of that, folks, by having these conversations. Even if it's one or two of us at a time, or 200 million, it's just a point along the line that we're already started on. You don't get to 200 million without passing two. You just don't do it. So we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep having these conversations. I'm going to continue being here. And we're going to continue spreading the awareness that we need to spread, so that we can find ourselves thinking outside of the box that was created to keep us all supporting the agenda of the socially economic elite and who they serve. Maybe that's the next podcast I need to talk about. I'm always talking about the socially economic elite. Maybe I need to talk next about who they serve and why they are the way they are. What do you mean who they serve? Well, even the secret societies themselves, even the Masonic groups, say that they serve hidden masters. Yeah, I think that's a good place for us to go next. Let's talk about the hidden masters and what their motivation is. What is their agenda? What drives them? Right? Um, to roll out the need for the elites to create a paradigm that has supported misery, pain, hate, anguish, devaluation of human life, all these negative, low vibrational frequency things that produce loose energy, etc. But the bottom line is we can, we are, we will move forward into a new paradigm that we're cementing in right now, that we're building. We are building it. And you can't build anything without a strong foundation. We're cementing in that strong foundation right now with each and every one of these conversations. We're building. So I thank you for building another week with Big King. I love you all. I thank you all. Please like, share, subscribe, click the notification button. Please support the worldwide movement, peace, love, respect, in whatever way in which you see fit. I grow the movement through my creative works, my books on Amazon, musical album on the popular streaming platforms like Apple Music, iHeartRadio, etc. Podcast like this podcast, Built with Big King, here on YouTube, and also the podcast I had started on rumble.com. We completed the first season, ran for 25 weeks. It was called Conspiracy Theories or Hidden Truth. Let's talk about it. Brother David, I want to thank you again and send you a heartfelt shout out. Man, thank you. Our conversation created a forum. You helped a great deal, brother. I appreciate it, truly. Please join me next week and please spread the word. And let's continue building this new foundation for this new paradigm. One that we like to say is rooted in, is expressed by the principles of peace, love, respect for all of us. And that's an independent, free thinking journey, not one that supports a paradigm of misery, pain, and hate like we saw in the past. A paradigm that's not looking out for our best interests and the best interests of our families, but a paradigm that we can all flourish in and thrive. We deserve that. We've earned that. Humanity has earned that. It's time. Thank you for building with Big King. I'm out. And of course, I thank you all. Big King Sadiq, I'm out.